It all hurt. There was no square inch of my body that was left unpunished. From my 7 blackened toenails, to the chafe all over, to my locked up quads and hamstrings that were completely incredulous. I was completely and totally exhausted. And in that moment, I was in a med tent receiving not 1, but 2 bags of IV fluid. Moments before, I had crossed the finish line of the 2015 Bayshore Marathon in my hometown, Traverse City, Michigan. Then, just getting a bit of clarity, I finally rotated my wrist over to check my time. Now, running was not a natural progression for me. This was not a predictable life path. I don't possess a single shred of athletic intelligence. I played 4 years of elementary school soccer. Other kids seemed to know where to go and what to do. I was not that kid. I had no idea what was transpiring. The only reason I played basketball when I was in 6th grade, the only reason I made the team, is that my best friend's dad at the time was a coach, and he took pity on me and gave me the last spot where I rode the pine for the balance of the year. Running actually came to me out of a lifestyle choice that I made in May 22nd, 1998, which was the day of my last class at Hope College. Sitting on the porch of my rented house on 13th Street, I was inhaling the smoke from my beloved Camel Light. And I had the realization that given my relatively obsessive personality, that habit, which I had picked up when college began, was very likely to be with me for the duration if I didn't stop then and there. Now, this was not an easy decision. I mean, I loved smoking. And I don't want to brag, but I was like really good at it. But wisdom, at least at that moment, prevailed. So I finished that last cigarette, flicked the butt into the neighbor's yard, and decided to trade one bad habit for another. So once I decided that I wanted to be a runner, I purchased the shoes. And that is the extent of the exertion that I offered for the first 2 or 3 years. I decided that it was actually a lot more fun to look like a runner than it was to actually be one. But once I decided to get healthy and really use them for their intended purpose, I found that over time my body loosened up to the concept. So a mile turned into 2 miles, turned into 5 miles. And I found throughout that I was actually enjoying the experience. So I signed up for a 5K, which turned into a 10K, and that turned into a 25K, and then a half marathon. And about 10 years after that last cigarette, I completed my first marathon. But even though I knew that was a significant accomplishment, and that was a big deal, the voice in my head told me otherwise. It reminded me that I was not an actual athlete. So I thought to myself, maybe if I can qualify and participate in the Boston Marathon, which is the mother of all marathons, maybe I would for once be able to silence that dissenting voice in my head for good. Now, getting into the Boston Marathon is a 2-step process. First, one needs to run a qualifying time at a qualifying race based on your gender and age group. And that used to be the only requirement. However, over the past few years, the Boston Athletic Association realized they had more people who were applying for the race and qualifying for it than they were able to support. I think today the race caps out at something like 30,000 participants. So to solve for this, they decided to open the race up during the application process for the fastest runners first. So if you beat your qualifying time by an hour or so, then that race will open up and you're almost guaranteed to get in. And then as the days passed, they opened the race up bit by bit to the people who were closer to their qualifying time. So the net result is that the closer you are to your qualifying time and your actual time, the more likely it is that the race may fill up before you're able to participate. Now, that year, I did achieve the first step of the process. As a male age 40, I needed a qualifying time of 3 hours and 15 minutes. And I ran that marathon in 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 32 seconds. The email from the Boston Athletic Association came in October of that year, and it read, "Dear Peter, thank you for applying to this year's race. In order to participate in this year's Boston Marathon, you need a qualifying time of 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 32 seconds. Now, let me just make sure that you're tracking on the information that I'm presenting here because it is critical to the narrative. I ran a marathon in 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds. I'm being told at that moment by the Boston Athletic Association that in order to get into that race, my ultimate goal, I needed a marathon of 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds. So it appeared, based on a million things that could go wrong on race day, 6 months of training, and however many miles of training, that I made it in to the very last second. Now, the first thing I was about to do is call my wife so that she would have an opportunity to bestow on me the adulation that I deserve for this incredible sports thing that her husband had just accomplished. But I had enough sense to keep reading the email. The email continued. Unfortunately, because you submitted a time of 3 hours, 12 minutes, 33 seconds, we are unable to accept you into this year's race. So remember a second ago when I was all like, I got 32 and Boston says I need 32, and now they're telling me that I actually ran in 33? You can imagine my confusion. When the Boston Athletic Association sends you this email, they don't exactly offer myriad ways in which you can respond with potentially a question or a comment. There's no live chat, there's no customer service email, there's no dispute resolution hotline. They have figured out that once you let one barbarian over the gates, the entire city will fall. So there's no way to get a hold of them for information. So the first thing I decided to do was go back to the Bayshore Marathon website to confirm that I remembered the right time. It's impossible that, given that it's such a long race and such a long duration, maybe I never thought that the seconds actually mattered, and therefore I didn't actually remember the correct time. By the way, the chance of that was 0 because I looked at that website 1,000 times between race day and October later that year, but I was open to the possibility as a fallible human, I had made a mistake. So I went back to the Bayshore Marathon website, and I found my name, Peter Houlihan, age 40, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds, thank you. Now, Traverse City, being a much more welcoming community than Boston, has a link right on the website. Have a question? Click here. So you know what I did? I clicked it because I had a question. So I got a response right back from them. And the response said, Peter, we agree that your race time is 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds. We're going to confirm with the company that handles our timing. But in the meantime, we want you to know we'll do whatever we can to help you. Now, that is what I needed to hear at that moment. I'm building a case against the Boston Athletic Association, and it's going to be airtight. This guy's an insider. I mean, he's probably got the number to the secret dispute resolution hotline. I bet we'll just call it later, have this whole thing cleared up. His follow-up came a bit later in that day. Peter, we have confirmed that your race time is 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds. Now, at the end of that sentence, I was really looking for definitive punctuation in the form of a period or an exclamation point. 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds, period. You got screwed. Let's call Boston. But at the end of that sentence, there were 3 periods, an ellipsis, more to the story. Your chip time, however, the time that is used when we submit your application to the Boston Athletic Association, 3 hours, 12 minutes, 32 seconds, 0.02. When we post our times to our website, we ignore everything to the right of the decimal point. Looks like it's the policy of the Boston Athletic Association to round up. And at that point, I knew that I had failed. There was no case to be made. There was no dispute resolution hotline to call. I had failed. And I had proved that negative voice in my head to be correct. This amount of time is an impossible duration to get one's brain around. In some ways, had it been a few seconds, it would have been an easier failure. And in trying to understand this for myself, I found a research project in which they were speculating on the amount of time that it takes for the sound from 2 fingers snapping to reach the human ear. They estimated that time to be 0.04. That's twice as long as it took for me to fail. Sometimes failure happens slowly, over days, weeks, months, years. For me, it happened just like that.